Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel, where everything you're about to hear and see has been done in one take. I'm your host, the One Take Man. This is actually the second recording of this video. The first one I didn't have any sound, so hopefully this one will work at least a little bit better. I already got the sound done, so we should be cooking with gas from now on. Anyway, now that I'm done with explaining that thing no one asked about, it's time I delve into the actual meat of the video, which revolves around the Pirates of the Caribbean as a franchise. Because if you were to look at its construction, it's kind of weird. Because you had one great standalone movie that had, that had lots of interesting things going for it. A lot of a lot of intriguing lore, a lot of intriguing twists and turns, and even though no one believed in it, and we're pretty sure it was bound to be a failure, it ended up being, one of the biggest movies of the year, and then it went on to become one of the biggest cash cow franchises of its IP owner. After two back-to-back sequels, forming a pretty solid trilogy, and then two more movies that were made one at a time. And I have to say, the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise as a whole has some issues, but you don't need to hear me talk about it. Pretty much every other person on YouTube has addressed this before. What I want to do instead is actually present a solution. And why am I the one to do it? Well, because last year on the, with this franchise's 20th anniversary, I decided I would do a countdown on the best villains of the franchise and what it is about them that allows them to stand out. And for the sake of this video, I thought I would do a follow-up looking at the entire franchise and thinking about how a second trilogy would most effectively function. Why a second trilogy? Well, I don't know. It just seems like a natural progression from from one standalone movie to then two back-to-back sequels to then having a full-on sequel trilogy in order to fully explore the available concepts and elements that this world has, and that this world can and that we could and that this world could see implemented. I will however reference other people from time to time, depending on how I see them. And the first question to address is, well, each movie kind of, each of these film units, cinematic units, i.e., the standalone, the sequels, had had some kind of a theme going for it, some kind of central arc. So, what would the central arc of this second trilogy be? Well, I've been thinking about coalescing the first trilogy into one and extracting a message from that, and then using that message as a counterpoint to for the sequel trilogy. How would that work? Well, my idea or my interpretation is that the first trilogy more or less represents Jack Sparrow as he is at his peak, when he is able to fully contend with the gods of his setting, and more or less assert himself as the as perhaps the premier pirate of his day and of his world. And this the second trilogy would would take that idea and do it in reverse, showcase the downfall of Jack Sparrow, and maybe even the downfall of piracy as a whole. that is something that could be worth looking into. And maybe given that this is Disney, they might not go full hog on a downer ending, but it might. But I'm thinking of building towards a bittersweet ending. I think that could also be quite effective. And I have to say, uh, I will draw on a lot of on plenty of elements from the movies that have already been out there, that have already been released. So don't be too surprised by them. In fact, my ideas for the fourth and fifth movies in this series are very strongly based on the fourth and fifth movies that Disney ended up actually putting out. So anyway, without further ado, it's time I delve into the actual trilogy, starting with On Stranger Tides, the official, movie, the official fourth movie. And for what it's worth, I actually think On Stranger Tides works quite well, quite well as both as a film in and of itself, and as a follow-up on the original trilogy. At least when looking at its base structure. But there are certain things I would want to swipe out or maybe enhance. And these elements are as follows. First of all, do not have the London sequence. There is really no reason to stage any part of this movie in London. You can really have it entirely within the Caribbean and have Jack Sparrow be brought in front of a governor rather than the King of England. And in fact, uh, in order to cement that this is a new beginning, we could start in Port Royal, which is right over here on this map, a map of Jamaica, by the way. I hope you can recognize it, and and have Jack be informed of what's going on there by a governor rather than the king. Barbosa would also be there. You could still have that, great chase sequence. You could still have the meeting with the meeting with Barbosa, with no, not Barbosa, Blackbeard's second in command, etc. Yeah, that's one thing I would change. The other thing I would want to change actually revolves around Barbosa, I don't know, it's not Barbosa, Blackbeard's second in command. Instead of that being Angelica, I'd rather want her to be Elizabeth Swann. Assuming Keira Knightley would still be up for it, I think that would I think she would work quite well to bridge this trilogy to this second trilogy to the old one. Showcase her taking care of her son in this wild and chaotic world as the second in command to the most feared pirate of all time, who for some reason shows a soft spot towards her. Maybe she even learns about his plot to find the Fountain of Youth and finds out that there are some golden chalices involved, and is thinking, okay, I'll steal the chalices you know and use that to fund further pirate endeavors, that kind of thing. That's something that would come up. And yes, I am indeed thinking that her son should also be involved. When it comes to other members of the crew, I'm also thinking that there could potentially be perhaps a younger character who's more eager to be a pirate, who, as the franchise would unfold, would go further and further up up the ranks and become more noteworthy as a more noteworthy as a pirate. You could refer to this character as AC, Ascending Captain. That could arguably be Elizabeth's son, but I'm actually thinking of him being a completely different figure. The next thing I want to address is actually Serena, or more precisely, how exactly Serena fits into the actual movie. because in On Stranger Tides, she is basically a love interest for the uh, preacher character Philip. Within my interpretation, I kind of want her to be more beastly, more venomous, more evil. Someone who would clap back, or at least try to clap back against Blackbeard. And at that point, um, Philip's mission would be to kind of place himself between two monsters and trying to and doing his best to to minimize the damage they could do to each other. And if that means that they damage him, so be it. You know, have him really take on that more sacrificial role. I think that would serve. I think that would add a very welcome level of moral complexity, shades of gray to the story as a whole. Could arguably serve as a demonstration for the uh, uh, ambiguity and darkness that Elizabeth would expose her son to, and have these characters experience a crisis of faith where they wonder, is this actually the world they really want to delve into? When it comes to the climax, I imagine it would be pretty much about the same, where you have the pirate crew under Blackbeard's command, and then the British crew under Barbossa's command, and then we also get a Spanish crew coming in and trying to destroy the thing and mop up everyone else away. And it could arguably be that just before the Spanish arrived, just before the Spanish and the British arrived, that the actual intentions behind Blackbeard getting behind Blackbeard getting Elizabeth on her ship with him is that he wants to take the years off of her son's life. I think that would be a very interesting. I think that would be an interesting contrast and perhaps a great example of the kind of real brutality and two-faced nature that Blackbeard really has. Because as the movie stands right now, he is just kind of generically mean and uninspiring. The least inspiring of all of the main villains of this entire franchise. So giving him that level, that edge, would really make for all the difference. The ending of the movie would be pretty similar, with the Spanish, you know, fucking away after messing everything up. Barbossa taking over Blackbeard's crew, or what's left of them. But the main difference would be that Jack manages to recruit the remaining British and pirate crews to him, and along with Gibbs, would talk about forming a new crew and trying to reassert his leadership, or his presence on the stage of Caribbean piracy. And AC would also be in the mix, perhaps as his second in command. I don't think Elizabeth would still be in this franchise after that point. I think perhaps at this point her character development would lead her to realize that she has done really all she needed to do, or that there is nothing else that really is of benefit to her within this world, and she could, I don't know, fuck away to London and spend the rest of her life over there with friends of her father and whatnot. Anyway, moving ahead, we've got Dead Men Tell No Tales. With the first movie, with On Stranger Tides, I've basically taken the main structure and then changed certain aspects around. With this movie, I instead want to keep certain aspects, but change the underlying structure around it. And what are the elements that I would want to keep? Well, the first of these is Barbossa. The Morbid Zoo actually had a retrospective of the pirate franchise, and within that franchise, she said that that Jack Sparrow and Hector Barbossa are basically the gods of this world. They are the main linchpins around which everyone else turns. I can't really say they are gods necessarily when looking at the setting and what it means on a and what thematic interpretations these carry. But I will say that they are emblematic of two distinctive pirate archetypes. Jack is basically the scoundrel. He is someone who has a lot of creativity and drive, but doesn't really want to put them in more traditional directions. So instead he seeks out freedom. Keep in mind, keep his speech about freedom from Curse of the Black Pearl in mind. He wants to go wherever and do whatever. He is very much a hedonist in the in the purest sense, and also and he also doesn't really intend to harm people, but will do it if it benefits him. Barbossa, on the other hand, is much more pragmatic, much more bloodthirsty, and he, in many ways, is a stronger equivalent of the pirate, not as a pop culture figure, but as a realistic, historic version, figure of brutality. One who also organizes or administers his appearance in such a way as to confer himself somewhat of a gentlemanly nature in order to give himself an air of distinguishment. So to give the impression that he's not just doing this for the hell of it. He's doing this because he considers himself worthy of command. That's why of the two, he is actually the one who becomes a cop, or a privateer, if you prefer. So yeah. The contrast between these two guys is actually very important when you look at the franchise as a whole, and it is this contrast that I want to emphasize over the course of this movie. And in order to do so, we skip to the second thing I want to save from Dead Men Tell No Tales, the villain. Salazar, the pirate hunter, who in many ways represents the exact brutality that Barbossa embodies, only aimed against piracy rather than for it, and therefore is in many ways the polar opposite of Jack Sparrow, who he is someone who seeks freedom in any form that could take, and Salazar looks for control, looks for dominance in any form that could take. That could also form the basis of his report with Barbossa, because they are both or they were both pirate hunters, and it could be that Barbossa's association with him ends up being being a great source of shame for him, something that propels him to adopt a more anti-authority character arc, potentially leading to him sacrificing himself in order to destroy Salazar. So yeah, those are basically the main elements I want to keep. Another aspect I want to keep is actually Jack Sparrow being down on his luck in the beginning and trying to and trying to pull off a whole bunch of heists to to keep supporting himself with piracy. But he finds out that his returns are getting increasingly low, and he doesn't really have what it takes to what it really takes to truly make it happen. Which leads to the AC. He slowly, over the course of this movie, as Jack is confronted with, with more and more, he is confronted also by his enemies, being both Barbossa and Salazar, in at different points throughout this movie. The AC ends up taking over and proving themselves as as a leader, even in these unusual circumstances. But what would this movie actually be about? What would these characters truly be after? Well, this is the point where I use one of the seeds that has been planted in the has been planted on Stranger Tides, namely the ships and bottles, because if you'll recall, in the first movie, that was more or less the cliffhanger that Barbossa might have Blackbeard's ship and crew now, but Jack Sparrow has a whole bunch of ships, and therefore he can and therefore he could arrange an entire fleet and make himself like truly noteworthy, truly dangerous as a formidable pirate. And I think this movie would be about trying to reverse that. Would be about trying to reverse that spell. Would be about trying to finding a way to return these ships to their real size, and potentially, while trying to return these ships to their size, that would awaken or activate Salazar, who who would find out that Jack actually intends to do so, launch a new wave of piracy over the Caribbean, and and decides that is something that he refuses to allow to happen. Barbossa could also be following him because he doesn't want to get outmuscled by his biggest rival, and then through these old guys bashing heads throughout throughout the rest of this movie, this could be where the AC ascending captain comes to the forefront and proves himself to be a a new kind of part, someone who can actually employ the more gentlemanly nature that both Barbossa and Salazar try to embody, that belonging, that authority, that official level, but also tempering it perhaps with the with the more freedom loving or freedom seeking nature that Jack Sparrow has, because with this model, he would recognize that or with the way the conflict is configured, he would perhaps be able to recognize what it is that drives people between in this conflict between freedom and authority, and he would know how to and he would find out the best way to give people freedom while also preserving or managing authority, be that his or others. And by the end of the movie, obviously this entire pirate fleet would be restored, but rather than Jack Sparrow being being the becoming the admiral of this grand fleet, he would instead allow the ascending captain to take on that role. Leaving him with just control of a ship, because after the demise of his longtime friend and rival, his heart would no longer be in it. And that moves us to the final movie of this second trilogy. And one aspect that I've realized is very much underexplored in terms of in terms of Caribbean lore, or in terms of or more broadly in terms of Mesoamerican lore. That's kind of a problem in general with these movies because even though they have an anti-colonial bent, they also kind of have an anti-native bent. So I kind of want to bring a little bit more pro-native sentiment into this, into these movies. Maybe maybe the magic that that Blackbeard stole in order to create these ships and bottles is actually to some extent tied into Native Americans or Mesoamericans magical traditions. It would not be that weird because keep in mind, Curse of the Black Pearl was about Aztec gold. So bringing that aspect back into the franchise would be would be a very welcome addition. And I think the best way to cap that off, while also rounding out this this franchise about Caribbean and perhaps even more broadly Mesoamerican folklore, is talking about El Dorado. So that would be the sixth Pirates of the Caribbean movie, the battle for El Dorado, as in someone discovers a city that is entirely made of gold, and there would be two parties trying to take control of it. One of it being, Jack's Jack's pirate fleet, and the other would be the British Imperial fleet. I'm not necessarily saying either of these should discover it, but I think someone else would. They would they would find out about it, and then after a series of confrontations, the the pirates would perhaps not seize control, but maintain the protection of the place. All the while, maintain the protection of the place. That would perhaps lead to the ascending captain becoming the becoming the final ultimate pirate leader, and Jack Sparrow could die trying to could die trying to keep the British presence away from away from El Dorado. So yeah, kind of think of it. Think of that as his attempt at a heroic sacrifice. Him realizing that his life is better served for reasons beyond himself. It would not be the first time he reaches that realization, but this would be the one time where where rather than accepting that it's inevitable, he accepts it even though it could be avoided. He realizes that it's he realizes that any option aside from it is worse, or would be worse for the people he cares about. That would also assume that he finds people for whom he would sufficiently care. So let's assume that maybe let's assume that the initial pirate fleet would be successful enough, both in terms of finances and in terms of actually achieving his his vision of freedom, in order to in order to really bring into that position where he realizes that sacrificing his life means protecting the goal for which he has spent his entire life. That's something this movie, I think, should go for. That brings the question of who should the villain be? Well, obviously he's going to represent the British Empire, and in order for him to fully represent the parts of the British Empire that that absolutely no one likes, let's call him John Smith with a Y, and say that he is absolutely just the most brutish, bloodthirsty, like sadistic mofo that has ever been within the British Navy. Like he's really going out there just to just to kill savages uh, and take all their wealth. He sees absolutely no problem with that because he is the because as a British man he is inherently better than them. That could be that could kind of be his logic. Let's also say that he has a sister, and that sister is Karina Smith. Yes, I'm actually doing this. While I actually do like Karina, and I don't think that the Dead Men Tell No Tales really utilizes her correctly, and I think she could perhaps be of better use within this movie. As you might be able to tell from the names, she would perhaps be John Smith's sister. Only he would see her as more trouble than she's actually worth, and thinks that her intellectual pursuits are nothing but trifles for her to occupy her time until she is brought to a man to become his basically his wench and broodmare. But nevertheless, he still brings her to the Caribbean because he thinks that might be a place where he can, where he could rid himself of her, and until then, he could still utilize the knowledge that she actually brings, and it could be that during an initial scuffle between himself and the pirate fleet, she would actually get captured and brought to the pirate settlement, maybe even to El Dorado itself. And when she spends time there, when she learns how exactly it is that the pirates operate, she eventually makes the decision to switch sides and ultimately joins AC in order to fight against her brother. Maybe even helps the pirates design stuff like better ships, better cannons, or otherwise various defensive machines that would allow them to stay one step ahead of their the uh, British Navy. Still, it would not be enough, which means that Jack Sparrow would have to sacrifice himself in order to make one particular less likely plan actually be successful, which it ultimately ends up being, and which leads to the pirates having a more or less permanent base of operations within El Dorado itself. This would kind of be a bittersweet ending, because even though this I think would serve as the bittersweet ending, because even though there would be more of a presence of the official official forces of the of the British Empire within the Caribbean, there is still a place for the people the people the audience would have followed, and for the ideals that the audience will have learned to trust, and maybe even love to the same extent as these characters. So yeah, that is basically my take on what the second Pirates of the Caribbean trilogy should have looked like. I'm thinking that they could have been that these movies could be released about 2 to 3 years of each other. So starting with 2011, when Stranger Times was released, the final one could be released either 2015 or 2017. So yeah, with a bit of luck, they could have also helped save Johnny Depp's reputation. But I digress. That's a secondary topic, one that I will simply mention and not delve too much further into. And yeah, I have nothing else to add on this front. I hope you enjoyed my take on the second trilogy. If you did, then I must ask you to please like this video and maybe even share it wherever you think other people will also like this video. If there is anything you'd like to add, either to the idea of a second trilogy in and of itself, or to how I personally would make it happen, then that's what the comment section is for. And if you want to see when my next video gets released, well then please subscribe, and ideally also ring the bell or do whatever else YouTube will ask of you in order to keep you notified. I also have a main channel where I talk primarily about book-related and literature topics, a link to which you can find in the description down below, right past my social media links, which I also suggest you check out should you choose to. If you're not interested in my book-related or literature-related facts, then you can stay on this channel and find whatever floats your boat from the grab bag I have available. And if none of that interests you, then well, you have the freedom to do whatever you want the rest of your day, because it is your day after all. Until next time, I have been the One Take Man.